Oh, it spilled my tea. I conducted an experiment with my students. A lot of students of all ages are not really having a understanding about Chat GPT. Now, I just looked at AI. I didn't know what AI was. That's a little bit past my generation. And I knew that there was a way that you could just type in questions and get answers. And so I was kind of playing catch up. I started hearing about AI when I was working on my dissertation. And an old friend of mine was just saying, well, just type in what you want your dissertation to be. And ChatGPT will put it out with all the citations and everything like that. So, well, he didn't say ChatGPT, he just kept saying AI. And a coworker showed me what ChatGPT was and kind of how to use it, but I still wasn't familiar with it. So when I started teaching at the university I'm at now, I started noticing these eloquent writing samples coming from students that it didn't match their vocabulary. What's going on, gunman? So I started looking into why these students were why their writing was so good, and not just that, how their writing was consistent. Like, people were using words that they generally don't use. How can I tell if a guy at the gym likes me? Oh my goodness. So I started explaining to them how Chat GPT doesn't work. And the smarter you are, the quicker you'll know how off Chat GPT is. So I think what's happening in high school is that young people are being taught that you can just go to these sites, cut and paste it, and that's how you do research. So this is what I did in the class. And if you are a user of ChatGPT, go ahead and try this. Look up who invented the cotton gin. It'll come up Eli Whitney. No matter what site you use, Google, AI, ChatGPT, it's going to come up Eli Whitney. That's not true. The cotton gin has been around since the 5th dynasty. If you look on Wikipedia, it'll say Eli Whitney invented it, but then under it, it will say it wasn't invented by Eli Whitney. If you look up the 19th Amendment will say that it gave women the right to vote. The 19th Amendment did not give women the right to vote. The 19th Amendment gave white women the right to vote. All other women did not get the right to vote until black women did in 1965. If you look up the 13th Amendment, 13th Amendment will say it abolished slavery. The 13th Amendment did not abolish slavery. If you read the 13th Amendment, it says you cannot have involuntary servitude or slavery except as a punishment for a crime in which you have been duly convicted, which means in this case you can have slavery, which is why we have the highest incarceration rate of anyone in the world, because our country was made on the business model of free to low labor costs. And that's what we have maintained. ChatGPT will tell you Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves. Abraham Lincoln did not free the slaves. In fact, all of Abraham Lincoln's Civil War legislation actually protected slavery. If you read the Confiscation Acts, the Preliminary Emancipation Proclamation, the Emancipation Proclamation, and the 13th Amendment, all of them kept slavery in some form or fashion. So, in showing them this, the students in the class was like, oh, wow, these answers aren't right. So, when you use ChatGPT to make sure you haven't made any grammatical errors or spelling errors or things like that, to make your work sound better, make it flow better, but you cannot hope and trust that the answers in ChatGPT are the correct answers, especially if you're in college. Now, I don't know what's happening at the high school levels. Perhaps it's just people not reading the papers, don't really care, giving you assignment. If you do it, you get credit. If you don't, maybe. But the people are coming to college thinking that's the way to be successful in college, is by going to ChatGPT, copying the answer, and putting it on your paper. And I'm not in favor of people using AI. I'm not in favor of people using AI and not knowing the answer. Another thing that I was asked about that I've seen online, there's some pictures being put out saying that the Statue of Liberty was supposed to be an African woman, and it was turned down by the United States, and they didn't want that symbol to show slavery because when I saw it, if you see it, you're probably going to see it on Facebook. A lot of young people don't use Facebook, but I'm sure people have it on other social media. It's a black lady holding a lantern. That is not the original Statue of Liberty. That is not true. I looked into it because I looked at the comments and people were just like, oh, America is so bad. Racism is so terrible. That's, and they just jumped on it, and nobody thought to look up this information to see if it's true. What is true is that the original Statue of Liberty was supposed to have broken chains in her hand. And the United States government said they did not want that. And because they didn't, even though it was commissioned in 1865, it was supposed to be a symbol to commemorate the Civil War ending. And the Civil War was actually the quote unquote ending of slavery. The United States didn't want to draw attention to slavery, just like the United States still doesn't want to draw attention to slavery. You got to remember, slavery was not mentioned in the Constitution until 1865. The Constitution was written in the late 1700s. So it was almost 150 years before the word slavery actually appeared in the Constitution. For that matter, the word democracy is not in the Constitution, nor is the word democracy in any of the constitutions of the 50 states. But the French designer of the Statue of Liberty felt that he was not going to negotiate the symbolism of the chains. And if you look at the Statue of Liberty now, there are broken chains at the feet of the Statue of Liberty. So, no, it was not supposed to be a black woman. It was not supposed to be a black woman holding a lantern. But it was a symbol of slavery, not immigration. For that matter, it was copper, not green, but it turned 3 different colors. When it first came and they put it out there, it was copper, talking about the Statue of Liberty. The salt from the water made it first turn black, and then it turned green. So that's why the Statue of Liberty is green. And because it was going to be out in the elements and taking on all kind of wind and rain and all kinds of weather, they went to the gentleman who designed the Eiffel Tower to make sure that the Statue of Liberty could move. So the technology that was put into the Eiffel Tower is also in the Statue of Liberty. What else have I been asked? I was asked about the market economy of the early 1800s and why. There are many important things about the market economy, but what is actually connected to today is immigration. In 1811, when the market economy began, New England didn't have the same type of land and flat land space that the southern colonies or the southern states had. And therefore, they began to make factories as part of the Industrial Revolution, as opposed to trying to keep up an agricultural base. That's also why slavery ended up not being in the North. It wasn't altruistic. It wasn't that northern whites liked slaves any better than the southern whites. The weather and the land was not conducive for business productivity or agricultural productivity. So they started the factories in the New England area and began what was called wage labor, where wage was connected to time. That hadn't happened before. In an agricultural community or economy, you do the work. It takes as long as it takes, and you sell the product when you have it. But in this particular setup, your work was per hour per year, per month, however you got paid, but your payment is now connected to time. This never happened before, and this is how everyone in America lives now. That is our natural understanding. I get a job, I go to work at this time, I go to lunch at this time, I go home at this time. It was 1811 when this started. Now, what is really significant about that for immigrants is today you hear, oh, they're taking your jobs, or they're eating cats, or they're coming here raping, or whatever else that they say about immigrants to get Americans upset about losing something. This is an old hat from the early 1800s, because what happened was the thought of America at first was come here, get land, and become a builder of your own wealth with your own land. And that was the mindset of most of the people that came, especially European men, white men. Well, when they began this wage labor, that was a new concept. They wanted land. So the only people that they could get to work in these factories were women and children. But they still needed strength, height, ability to do dangerous jobs, willingness to do dangerous jobs. And so they got the immigrants to do the work. Because the immigrants are coming, they don't know about land ownership or wage labor. They're just coming for opportunity. So they fill these factories full of women and immigrants. Now, this is what's important. They pay the women less because the women were not, the excuse was, the women were not the heads of their households. So they were just paying them a little bit of money to, help ends meet. The immigrants didn't really know any better, so they could pay them whatever. Well, once the big business had taken over commercial farming and started putting the small white farmers out of business, the family farmers out of business, the family farmers had to do something. So now they're forced to go into wage labor. Well, when they go to wage labor, the jobs aren't paying enough for you to live on, because remember, they put forth the ideology to the women. Well, this is just for you to make ends meet, but what they're doing is keeping the wages low, right? The immigrants are coming in, they're telling the immigrants, well, that's what we're paying, that's what they're working for, you got to work for the same thing. They don't know any better, so they're taking the jobs. Well, when the white men come to get work at all, because they've been put out of business by the monopolies and the corporations in commercial farming, now they come to the factories, and the factories are telling them, well, we can't give you a job because the immigrants have your job. Now think about it. If I own the business, I do all the hiring. The immigrant cannot take your job. I can only give it to him. But that worked in that day, and it still works today. Notice our most stringent immigration laws are against brown countries. It is easier and faster to get in this country from European countries than it is to get in from a brown country. And a perfect example of that is the American debate about border safety is only about one border. If we're worried about our borders, plural, why are we not worried about our northern border? And what I tried to illustrate is the only thing that's new in the world is the history we don't know. This has happened many times. This play on immigration to make Americans panic. And it goes back to 1676, the Bacon's Rebellion. And the resolution to Bacon's Rebellion were the 1681 anti-miscegenation laws. And that was when whiteness was created. Yes, white did not always exist. White as an identity and as a privileged position in society was created. There were no white people before 1681. It is actually written into legislation, the anti-miscegenation laws, who was white, and at this time, Irish, Jews, and Italians were not white. They didn't become white until the 1940s, when the population needed to broaden, because ever since the Haitian Revolution, where there were the workers outnumbered the white population, they began keeping a census of how many, what the ratios were, because it was a 10-to-1 ratio in Haiti, which was one of the main reasons why the Haitian Revolution was successful. But in the anti-miscegenation laws of 1681, whiteness was created. That was where poor whites were given privileges, not to elevate them closer to rich whites, but to make them higher by dropping down non-whites. And that was the articulated plan sent to Great Britain that discussed how American society or economic structure would be restructured to divide and conquer the people at the bottom, where they were fighting with each other instead of attacking the rich. Because that's what Bacon's Rebellion was. All of the poor people, Native Americans, black, white, Asian, whoever, all the poor got together and attacked the rich, and it was longer than a year. In fact, Great Britain had to come and end the war and stop the rebellion. Well, obviously, after they stopped the rebellion, they write a letter to the governors that were over the colonies, and they said, well, how are you going to keep this from happening again? And that's what they told them. They said, we're going to use this divide and conquer technique. And you will see that divide and conquer technique not just among racial lines, but among gender lines. Not just among gender lines, but within races. Blacks, Africans, light-skinned blacks, mulattoes, darker skin, brown skin, separate them, treat them better. The really light-complected blacks, we're going to treat them better than the darker skinned blacks. And that still exists in some places in the Caribbean and South America. Whites, you got the poor whites, you got they'll break each other up by ethnicity, by class, to keep them fighting against each other, right? Pushing tribalism. They had the civilized tribes to keep the Native Americans fighting each other. So the divide and conquer is class, race, gender, and the first place that we see it in American history, or North American history, is in the anti-miscegenation laws of 1681. And most significantly, that was where the distinction and the privilege of whiteness was given. Now, so you say, well, if they weren't white, what were they before that? There was no homogenous identification between people of European descent before this particular law. They had identified themselves by way of nationality. I am an Englishman. I am a Frenchman. I am a Spaniard. That was how white people identified themselves. White did not exist. This was something that was made up. It was engineered around economics. So when people say, oh, it's a social construct, no, it's not. It's an economic construct. All right. These kind of things that come up in history bring us to think about, because history is great, but it has to be applicable to today. Let's take the slogan, "Make America Great Again." All right. When was it great? When was America broadly great? Because for the first 200 years, you had slavery. 1776 to 1865. So 17, 18, so just over 100 years, you had slavery. And then the next 100 years, you had convict leasing, Jim Crow, segregation. And remember, segregation was endorsed by the government. So this wasn't poor practices by horrible Southern people. This was the United States government. And separate but equal was around immediately in 1865 in legislation in Southern states, particularly North Carolina. So after segregation, we had civil rights resistance, and then we moved directly into Nixon's war on drugs, and then Reagan militarized the war on drugs, and now that war is against American people, by the way. Because you know the president declares war. So for Nixon to declare war on drugs, which it was more of a theoretical and political thing, but Reagan, that was an overt militarized war with financial incentives on the American people, particularly people of color. And this is really not up for debate. This has been admitted by presidents, Congress people, and politicians. We were wrong. We disproportionately affected the black community, which means they disproportionately policed the black community, which means they differently policed the black communities. Hence your George Floyd situations, hence your Rodney King situations, and therefore and so on. Native Americans still, if you want to know how bad Native American genocide is and if it's still a practice, think about when the last time you saw a Native American. If you think you're not a beneficiary of what happened to Native Americans and that is still going on, every time you pay taxes, every time you pay a toll on a major highway, those are Indian trails, we are paying into the system that keeps them on Native American reservations. So we as Americans are not only beneficiaries of the genocide of Native Americans, we're active participants when we pay our taxes, when we buy property, when we own property. We're beneficiaries of slavery. We're beneficiaries of coverture, the misogyny that stopped women from building wealth. And this was into the 20th century? So I ask, then not to forget the Japanese internment camps, the Chinese that were abused on the railroad, the Mexican American War that removed Americans from, which removed Mexicans from the western part of the country. My question to the MAGA people is, when was America great? And is what you're saying make America great again for a particular group of people? Because even poor white people have never had a good time in this country. The biggest impoverished community by number are poor whites. So what time is it that these people want to go back to in our country's history that was good for them? Because our country has been good to a very small percentage of our population. Most of our population struggles. And it's on purpose. Trump was just talking to one of the leaders from the Ukraine. And he was telling him that Biden had already given him $300 billion for their war. To stop hunger in America would be $20 billion. To stop homelessness in America would be $50 billion. Elon Musk alone, I'm not talking about Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, all those other guys, alone, the money that was sent to the Ukraine, not the money that was sent to Israel, because we sent hundreds of billions there too, could have stopped hunger for American people, American women, American children, American men. Poverty and hunger in America is an economic choice. We're making America great again? Was there ever a time that we didn't have hungry people here? Was there ever a time we didn't have homeless people here? When we have the money to spend, Elon Musk could stop hunger and homelessness in America and his lifestyle not change. So that throws me, just that slogan. And let's take blacks out of it. Let's take all of the oppressed communities out of it. When was America great for poor whites? During the Depression? During 2008, 2009, 2010? When all of the systems failed because all of the money went up? If you don't know American history, I can't make that statement. I can't make the statement I was about to make. I don't know why anyone would make a statement about something being good again if they do not know or cannot articulate the year or years that it was good. What am I trying to go back to? And I've never met a person who would articulate that for me. And If you can articulate it, please put comments in the chat. I would love to have you on my recorded show. Listen, I'm old. Class in session. And I would love for you, and I don't want to even debate. I just want to listen. I want to learn from a MAGA person. What is that time period? What is that time period? And what does that mean about America when we choose a time period that was horrid for fellow Americans?